giving us your feedback and comments and for your interest in these two wonderful parks projects at Log Boom Park and Squires Landing. They're going to be fantastic projects when they're developed, and they're a result of a lot of the community input and feedback that we've received. So I'd like to also introduce Rob Carr-Lindsay, who's the city manager. So if you've not had a chance to say hello to Rob, then later. I don't really need to say a lot because the presentation is going to tell you who the folks are here on the consultant team, but I would like to also introduce Maureen Kalaisi, who's the Parks Project Manager. So Maureen is the city contact person if you have any questions about these two projects. And the contact information will be the last slide on the screen after the presentation, so take a note of that. And here's Maureen, so you can now put a face and name together. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Shane with our consultant team, and he can introduce the rest of the members of the team and then get started with the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. So I'm Shane Phillips. I'm with Mott McDonald, and I'm the consultant team lead. And with me tonight are some of our team members. Behind me is Jim Brennan from Brennan Associates. He's our landscape architect and site design lead. The other team members are in the back. Chris Cheesla on the right. He's Confluence, and he's our environmental and regulatory specialist. And in the middle is Graham from J.E. Brennan. And then Abby Mitchell's on the left with Mott McDonald, coastal engineer. So, yeah, thanks, everybody, for coming today. This is, I guess, just did the introductions here. And I know everybody's got busy lives and appreciate everybody coming out and spending time here. So a few things first. The open house here. Many of you got here earlier and had a chance to go through and look at the different boards and ask questions. And that's really what it's all about tonight is hearing from you and having an opportunity to field your questions and explain about the projects in a little bit more detail. So the format for tonight, we're doing this presentation for a couple of reasons. Give everybody an opportunity to hear some of the details about how did we get to where we're at from the last public outreach and the master plan that was part of the bond measure, and then update you on where we're at this point. And so the presentation here, there's the other purpose is there's a number of people that can't make it tonight. And so this is being recorded and can be posted onto the city's website. So those who couldn't make it will have a chance to get the same kind of overview as well. So what we ask is we're going to try to get through this in like 20 or 25 minutes. And any questions you have, just hold them until we're done. We're going to break back into the session with the boards in the back. So first is I'll go over a quick project overview, the design development process, and then we'll get right into some details on Log Boom Park and then Squires. And then, as I said, we'll get back into the breakout session for the open house. So the design development overview, so a couple things. So over on the map here, we got Juanita Drive, Lake Washington, the Sammamish, Bothell Way for perspective. And so tonight we're just talking about two projects. Log Boom Park is over here. It's a waterfront park on Lake Washington. And then Squires Landing Park over here off the Sammamish and Swamp Creek. So these projects came out of the Imagine Kenmore, the public outreach that started back in 2015. And our team was hired back in 2015 to come up with the master plan at a very high level, listening to what the community said back at that time. We looked at a variety of different alternatives and incorporated that into the master schemes that became part of the bond measure, the Walkways and Waterways, that was adopted in the fall of 2016. So since that time, we started this current phase in early 2017, which is a preliminary design phase. And the purpose of the end of this current phase is to put together regulatory permit applications. A future phase that's not at this point would be final design for bidding and construction. That would come in a subsequent phase. But in this phase, it included data collection, extensive stakeholder engagement with various groups, whether it be the boating community and other groups, as well as regulatory agencies. As you can imagine, any projects that have development on the waterfront, there's a lot of different permits that are required. That requires a lot of early consultation with those agencies to hear and listen to what kinds of concerns and considerations they have, and then incorporate that into the design. And then from that is the site design refinement and additional detailed engineering analysis. And then after that is the preliminary design, and again, that's like a 30% level, and then the submission of permit application. So the blue text there, the first one there, site design, that's where we're at on Squires Landing. We have initiated that, and in the next couple months we'll be starting on the preliminary design. At Log Boom, we're currently in the preliminary design phase, getting ready to make the applications for permits here in the next couple of months. So that brings us to first Log Boom. And so Bothell Way here, Burke Gilman Trail, and then the existing boating facility pier. So again, going back to that outreach that was done back in 2015, 2016, was the community really expressed a lot of interest in getting more access to not only parks, but to the waterfront. And so out of that came the project goals. And so what you see listed here are the primary goals for Log Boom, and for that matter, there's a lot of similarities also in the goals over at Squires Landing. So first is improving the access to the shoreline, and then improving circulation within the park. And so people that are coming to the park, either bicycle or pedestrians or by car, once they're in the park, improving their usability and circulation within the site. And then with that improved circulation is having additional access points to the waterfront. And that includes also an expansion of the existing beach. And that would be a gravel foreshore and a sand back beach. And then also providing boat rental facility. So for people that don't have their own small carry boats, they'd have the opportunity to still get out on the water through a rental program and some storage. And then, of course, of any of these is providing ecological enhancement and restoration as part of the project too. And we'll get into that more here in a few minutes. So before talking about the improvements, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the existing park features. And so some different things are listed here, but as you come in, if you're coming in by car, we've got the existing parking lot here. There'd be no changes to the parking lot. They would stay as it currently exists. And then you come in further, there's a series of pathways. There's a playground. There's a pump station up here that's part of the metro sewer line that comes through here. There's an easement through there. And then there's a restroom facility. And so the white line here depicts the property boundary. So the city park is actually on the water side of that white line. So you can see it's a fairly narrow parcel. And there's some wetlands in here, and so there's some constraints that we had to work around. And then as you come along the other side, there's a pathway going out here, out to the pier. None of this has any change as well. So really the major change to any existing park features would just be some localized area of the existing pathway that would be removed in order to tie in to the new facilities and the new pathway that's there. All the other features would remain as is. So as I mentioned earlier, for the bond measure, this was the concept plan that was part of that. And this is what we've been working on refining in more detail. And so again, for reference, Bothell Way is up here, the lake, and the parking lot. So there'd be enhanced access walkways coming through here with new pathways. A rental building would be right here. That would be right off the pathway as you first come into the expanded park. There'd be a hand carry launch here for kayaks and other paddle boards and things like that. An expanded beach, I mentioned earlier, it'd be a gravel beach on the front slope, but there's a pretty substantial area in the upland adjacent to the water that would be sandy. continuation of pathways, picnic pavilion further down, and a couple access points. And we'll talk about this a bit more in a moment, but some of these access points we ended up consolidating. That was some of the feedback we got from regulatory agencies, was to really confine the use so that we can maximize some of the restoration of some of the wetlands and riparian areas of the shoreline. So there's going to be a lot of environmental enhancements on the site through this existing high-quality wetland and some other areas along the property. And so, again, as part of that consultation, working with the agencies, there's a few things that came up. The other thing is we collected a lot more information, so more detailed wetland delineations, surveys, both bathymetric out in the lake and then along the shoreline. That helped in conducting additional design refinements and analysis. And then the discussions with the agencies and consultation with King County. King County's got the metro sewer line that comes through the site. Was, trying to keep the improvements completely on city property. There's some localized areas and pathways to connect into the existing pathways that would be on King County property, but the majority of all the improvements would be on the city park property. And then I mentioned earlier, avoiding wetland impacts as much as possible and reducing the number of access points and keeping those confined. And then one thing that came up too, there's a lot of questions about the beach. Is this a good location for a beach? Is it going to be stable? And so we did a real detailed site assessment and coastal engineering analysis. And so when we break out, we've got some boards back there. You can ask some more questions on that. But it's a good location for a beach. But the back beach will be sand. The front foreshore will be gravel. And I'd like to turn it over to Jim to talk a little bit more about some of the site design features.
All right, so thanks, Shane. This is the updated plan, and I'll just point out a couple of the features. As Shane said, not much has really changed since that earlier concept design. You can see the beach shown here at summer lake level, so this will be that edge of the shore at the beach. And this color is the gravel portion of the beach and then sand above that, so it's a nice spacious beach with lots of room. And in the design, what we're really trying to do is weave the new improvements into the fabric of the existing park and really relate to the vocabulary that's already been established out there and the function, and really just expand on those. So this will be a much nicer beach. It'll be a really fun place to spend some time, and we're going to work to attract people to this area so they can get down to the water. One of the changes we made is we moved the shelter. This picnic pavilion is now located closer to the beach so that it's nearer the parking lot. So if you arrive at the park, you can park here and then carry your boat to launch here. This is the boat rental facility with some trees flanking it, so it's kind of buffered and softened. And then the path, as it continues on toward the Burke-Gilman Trail here, is laid out in kind of a flowing line that relates well to the existing design vocabulary in the existing park, which is really nice flow. And there will be some plantings along the shore that will improve the ecological value of the shoreline. We'll be removing some of the non-natives and adding some of the beautiful native plants that will just create better places for birds and overhanging vegetation for fish. So those are all considerations. There'll be an access point located right here with some concrete seat walls and just a real intimate place to gather and get down to the shore, and a touch point at that existing beach there. The topography in this location is really good for that. So that's just a quick overview, and we can answer more questions when we get into the breakout. Did I miss anything, Shane?
Nope.
Okay, great. So we have a couple sections then that will show the layout. This section shows that touch point I talked about here, where it's you can see it's a very gentle gradient and goes down in amongst a grove of trees to get down to the lake. So you can see the asphalt path and then a crushed rock path leading down to the lake. And then moving a little bit farther to the east is the picnic pavilion with a concrete plaza around it, fairly modest in size, right adjacent to the beach. And there's also an accessible access where you can get from that plaza out into the beach environment. And you can see the sand area and then the gravel that Shane talked about, and some of the riparian vegetation enhancement. And then moving farther to the east, this is the boat rental facility. And so this will be a place to store some of the boats. There'll be some paving around that and easy access to that beach and some plantings to soften that building. And just some images that show what that could look like. There's the waterfront promenade around the context of the beach, maybe some seat walls, benches, and plantings integrated. Another view of that, how it might look. And then the picnic pavilion could look something like this really nice pavilion that was just added to Rhododendron Park.
And mentioned a little bit about schedule earlier, so just a little bit more detail here. So tonight, it's the 22nd, so it's a public open house. Again, the next steps for Log Boom will be the permit application submission, which would be here in the late spring or early summer. The grant application process through some state agencies to look for some additional funding to match in what the city funding is has been initiated. That goes through October. And again, the permitting then would usually, takes some time, 12 to 24 months or so. The permitting process and then the design, and then of course after the final design would be bidding and construction. So the plan is to have the construction all completed by 2023. So that brings us to Squires Landing, and so we'll go through a similar discussion on this one again. Over on the east side of the city, adjacent to Swamp Creek and Sammamish River. As I mentioned before, a lot of the goals are very similar here, but with a lot more focus on additional accessibility for hand launching facilities and also a large public gathering area. We have a lot more property to work with on the Squires property, and so there's a greater extent of pathways and public gathering and access areas here. So again, on existing park features, just to get oriented, this is a more zoomed out and then zoomed in. Sammamish River, Swamp Creek, the adjacent road up here. And so in more detail, there's an existing west property that was recently acquired by the city. It's referred to as a Tweed property. And then we're calling the east property as a larger parcel. That includes the pond or lagoon. And so on the existing west property, there's an access that comes down, an easement, a parking area, and then some other facilities here. So there's this existing mobile home will be removed. There's a garage that's for storage that will stay. The majority of this site amenities will remain, with the exception of the mobile home. There's a rebuilt dock out on the water here and a little launch that will remain. That's relatively new there, been replaced. The lagoon dock that's in the lagoon that's used for a chase boat and some other purposes, that will get removed and replaced as part of the project. We'll show those new docks here in a moment. And so the uses will stay fairly similar, but there'll be a lot more accessibility between the two different parcels in the finished project. So this, again, going back to the 2015 concept, and I'll mention a little bit about what that was, some of the refinements that have occurred, and then Jim will go through some of the details. And so coming in off 175th is over on the left, and again, Sammamish River over on the right, and Swamp Creek. This is the lagoon in the middle. So if coming in as a pedestrian off the sidewalk or a car coming in off the road, there'd be a new parking lot here. There's approximately 30 stalls, so there'd be a fairly large expansion of parking opportunities. There'd be a storage area. There was planned storage area in the uplands, and then access down a pathway to a plaza. This was the larger gathering area, and then some floats for a hand carry launch. And then, of course, the lagoon a series of pathways that would interconnect to overlooks and then out to the peninsula with overlooks over here. This all interconnected back over to the west property and that dock I mentioned earlier, and a new pavilion. And so the idea is this would all be interconnected. If you parked at the new parking lot, you could access through the pathways over to the existing parking lot and vice versa. So this is similar here, but it shows some of our constraints and design changes. One of the things is there's a metro sewer easement that comes through the site, and so there's some limitations on what we can build within that easement area, and so we've made some adjustments to the plaza and some of the pathways and boardwalks and things like that to work around that easement. The other thing is through the consultation with the regulatory agencies, there was a lot of interest in water temperatures and water quality, both in Swamp Creek and in the lagoon. And as part of that analysis, we went out and collected water temperature data at the end of the summer and early fall. Based on that data and our analysis, we concluded that we would improve conditions by eliminating the one little access in here. So originally, there's the existing access. In the original master scheme, there was a secondary, shallower access proposed. And so under the new scheme, we're going to focus on a single access that's a little bit deeper, that provides better flushing and water quality. There's been a little bit of realignment of some of the floats to line up better with the plaza, and the same amount of moorage or dock space that was shown in the master scheme is in the new plan. It's just in a slightly different configuration. Jim?
Thanks, Shane. So I'll point out a couple things here, but as Shane mentioned at the entrance, we're really going to make clear signage and visual access into the parking lot area and to the restroom so that it's a really welcoming park. And there's some existing trees in this area that we're working to save. There will be a few trees removed, but we know that from our earlier public meetings that the trees were important, and so you can see the groves of existing trees here that are in this darker green that are all going to be saved and remain. And from the parking lot, you'll see the plaza area and the float and really be drawn down to the water. Great touch point here. A hand carry boat launch opportunity here on a little beach pocket here. And the pedestrian entry for those who are walking or parking out on the street can enter into the park this way and either go to the plaza area or move over toward the Tweed property. In this area, we are not really changing anything much. The parking will remain as it is, and the existing garage building will stay. The manufactured home will be removed, but we're replacing it with a picnic pavilion. And you can see the bridge circulation here. We're really taking into account the opportunity for potential future extensions up the river and through the rest of the park property. Plantings will be mostly native, designed to provide ecological benefit, overhanging vegetation along the stream. We do want to plant vegetation on the south side of Swamp Creek so that we can shade that to keep the water temperature down in Swamp Creek. Gathering area here that will provide a great overlook of Swamp Creek, the lagoon, and out to the Sammamish River. And you can see the new float that Shane talked about here on the west side of the lagoon. Some of these areas are wetland, and we're going to do some wetland enhancement, or in some cases wetland creation. So those are shown in a darker green color. Anything else that I missed?
Covered it well. I think you have a couple more slides here.
Great. So this section shows the entrance to the lagoon area and some of the boardwalks that are provided. You can see the overhanging vegetation here that will be on the south side of Swamp Creek, which is located right here. And this is the location where the existing manufactured house is, and so you can see that picnic pavilion. So this is looking right through this section line right here. So again, Swamp Creek, a viewpoint, out on the peninsula side of Swamp Creek on the riverbank. This will provide great viewing of some of the boating activities out on the Sammamish River. And then a cross-section from the parking lot. You can see the section line right here, starting with the parking lot and going down to the lagoon, which is located right here. You can see the waterside plaza, and you can see the gangway to the float and some of the boats that are being launched there. And so for people that are doing boating activities, they can load and unload or store boats up in this area. There's a restroom, but a nice path that's very gently graded down to that area, and this is all accessible. And then plantings, as you can see, some of them are saving existing trees and vegetation, others are new plantings. And then this cross-section you can see right here, and it starts with a viewpoint that we have over here, which is located in this area. The Cedar Grove, another cut through the boardwalk, which is located right here, and then through the entry channel to the lagoon, and then over toward the Tweed property, and the picnic pavilion will be located right here, and the existing hand-carry boat launch that's there. You may have seen the new float out there. It's really beautiful, and that's a nice improvement that's already been added. And so we're just, again, weaving this design into some of the great elements that are out there already. Picnic pavilion, again, could look like this, getting some consistency with other pavilions in the area, like Rhododendron Park. Just an example of what that gangway and float might look like. Boardwalks could look like this, something that's durable and has some grading so it lets light through to the vegetation underneath. And the float could look something like that. Opportunity to do native plantings along the creek and the river. Again, we really want to emphasize maximizing fish habitat and wildlife benefits, getting that shading. So new plantings that will establish quickly. A mix of conifers and deciduous trees and some overhanging shrubs.
So back on the schedule, again, open house tonight on the 22nd. And so we'll be moving into the preliminary design and permit application submissions later in the fall this year. And again, this is on a similar track as Log Boom Park on a grant application process with the state of Washington. And then again, permitting, final design, bidding would be between 2018 and 2022 with completion of construction in 2023. So before we conclude here, I want to see, Maureen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think Rob just wanted to, which one works? This one. Hello, I'm Maureen. Thank you again for coming, and appreciate your patience while we go through the presentation. Someone's very smart. They're taking a photo image of my contact information. If you have follow-up questions outside of tonight's meeting, you think of something, feel free to contact me. All the presentation materials will be available on our website. Once you go to that web address under Walkways and Waterways, there's 5 projects, and that's what I wanted to share with you. These are 2 of the 5 projects. Another project that we just completed, some of the images we were showing of the boardwalk, is of Rhododendron Park, where we provided a walkway access and floats to the Sammamish River just across the way from Squires Landing. And then we have 2 other roadway projects that are improving pedestrian and bicycle connectivity in the city, and that's right along here on 68th, and then heading up to Juanita Drive. And those projects are also on our webpage or our website at that address. We just had an open house in, February, for the 2 walkway projects. These are the 2 waterway projects, with the 3rd waterway projects already completed. So you can go to Rhododendron Park and take a look at that project. So that completes this portion of our presentation. And so we're happy to engage with you on questions and any comments you have. We have 2 comment sheets that we're welcome to write your comments down on, and we look forward to mingling with you in the back of the room. So that concludes our presentation.